Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the second webinar in today's webinar series. We have two more this afternoon and a total of 16 for the 2021 series here that'll take us through February 2nd. So if this is your first time joining us, welcome. If you're returning, thank you for supporting us, and we hope you're finding these webinars informational and enjoyable as well. Real quick, I just want to mention that Kelly Hintersker from Norris was our winner from our last webinar series, so congratulations to Kelly. And then today we have CFC joining us for key ratio trend analysis. This presentation is going to last roughly 45 minutes. We'll leave 10 or 15 minutes at the end for questions. We do ask that you please keep your microphones muted, and if you would please submit those questions to us through the chat function, and you can use the little drop-down box, send those questions directly to AIEC, and we will moderate those questions to our presenter for you. Real quick, we've had a little bit of change up on our PE credits. Brian, you want to speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, for those engineers that might be on this call, fortunately, we were able to offer PDHs for our previous 16 webinars that were in November and December. Because of we varied some of the topics for this go around. So we're only offering PDHs for certain ones. So be sure to watch those emails, look at the registration. Any ones that we're going to be offering PDHs for, there'll be a little orange emblem saying PDH is available. So, you know, be sure to register for those and attend those, and I'll get you the credits for each of those sessions. Unfortunately, this is not one of those sessions, but I still think this is a very good session for you know, all those co-ops out there to make sure you know where you're at compared to other co-ops and see where you're trending. So with that, our presenter today is Brian Stegan with CFC. He is the regional vice president serving electric co-ops in Illinois and the northern half of Indiana. For those that may not know Brian, he actually was the senior vice president and CFO at Eastern Illini Electric. And worked in financial accounting and management during his 24.5 year career before joining CFC in July of 2018. He currently works out of his home in Paxton, Illinois, which is where you can see there in the background he's at currently. So with that, I'll hand it over to you, Brian.
Thank you. And nice to be with you. It seems like it's been a long time since I've been out to see some of the co-ops, and hopefully we can resume travel again soon. I've been to one in the last couple of months. Hope you all had a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And again, we're going to talk about KRTAs today, and I'll give you a little bit of a brief background here. The key ratio trend analysis has really been one of the best tools in the industry, in the co-op industry, where it compares 813 to 815 co-ops each year and breaks it down in a lot of different ways. This is a 5-year benchmarking review that can be used by a distribution co-ops management board to make sound financial decisions based on cooperative trends that are detailed in the report. And we'll take a look at some key areas of cooperative today. Again, we're looking at Illinois co-ops kind of as a group. But again, I'm more than willing to help anybody to learn how to do this for your own co-op, and we'll talk about some of those things at the end. But for now, we're going to kind of jump into the KRTA. And just to give you some more background for some of the newer people that might be on from the financial perspective, it's just a tool to help you give a more complete picture of your cooperative's performance. We analyze distribution operations, highlight strengths and weaknesses, look at past and present performance, look for trends, and look for things maybe we can predict where this particular ratio is headed. We look at the absolute and relative position of your co-op compared to other co-ops, such as within the state, within your power supplier size, different things like that. There actually is now 145 financial ratios that have been developed. This project started back in 1975 and is really looked forward to by a lot of the financial people in trying to see how things are going and how you guys stack up compared to your peers. I also will just tell you that the KRTA is kind of predicated, and one of the most important values is we look at the median values as we're comparing these different numbers and statistics. And so if you look at this example here, we've got 5 numbers to the left there. If you average them, you get 1,626. We're actually using the median example. We're looking at that series of 5 numbers and picking the one in the middle to determine, what the median value is, so that 50% would be higher and 50% would be lower, et cetera. So that's kind of the basis for the KRTA. So that median value is something that is predicated on. So today, and also I wanted to tell you, what you can't do with KRTA is you can't really answer why ratios are high or low. That kind of becomes the accountant's job, the controller, the CFO, to dig behind the numbers to find out what's going on, what the numbers mean and how it relates. Most of our co-ops have very similar things, but they're all different. They all have unique aspects, and sometimes those unique aspects play into why our expense ratios are higher or lower. A good one is density. A co-op with real low density has a hard time controlling costs in the same way that a co-op with higher density does. You can't really interpret financial goals, but what you can do is see those trends, variances. You can benchmark your results of operations and see how you're going from year to year. And later in the presentation, we'll talk about, the KRTA is basically built for 5 years worth of data, but we have access to more data in a different way. And again, looking for strength, areas for improvement to help the co-ops help manage the co-op better and moving forward, how to take advantage of some of the data to understand it and then make decisions based on where you want to be with that particular ratio and what you need to do to get there. So for today, we're going to talk about these various areas: kilowatt hour sales trends, consumer and total utility plant growth, revenues, margins, expenses, financial performance, cost of capital, Fat Cap, and the cooperative strength of the Illinois co-ops. And one of the things before we get started, one of the big variables that affect every one of us that make budgeting hard, that make managing these ratios difficult, is weather. So weather plays a huge part in kilowatt hour sales. And the economy plays a part too, but weather seems to have a very, very significant impact. 2011 was a big year that climate events hit all over the United States and impacted Illinois as well. So you've got to take those into account when you're looking at these ratios as well. Okay, so next we're going to talk about just electric sales and the sales mix and how Illinois distribution co-ops, what they look like. And so if you look here at this particular one, you've got 10 years worth of data, and it shows residential being remarkably consistent from 2010 all the way to 2019. At 68.82% in 2010, dropped down to 66% in 2012, and then back up to 68.53 in 2019. So it'll be interesting to see what impact the 2020 data has. Again, with the pandemic going on, some of these things change a little bit, but the consistency should stay fairly true without a doubt, especially with sales mix. Also, by looking at this particular slide, if you look at the kind of the brownish color there, you can see that back in 2010, our small commercial sales made up 16.91% of total sales. And by the time we got to 2019, they were up to 19.38, and a slight uptick even from last year. And by the same token, if you look at the gold color, you can see that large commercial went from 15.44% down to 12%. So that small commercial seems to be growing, and large commercial just down some. And then there's various other ones in there that are very, very small. But that's kind of an interesting slide to look at. And as we go along here, make sure you ask questions through the chat box if you have any, and we'll pick those up at the end. Next slide we're going to take a look at is the average residential usage kilowatt hours per month. And if you look at this one, this one's a little different in that the US median is the blue checked line, and it shows 1,174.88 kilowatt hours was the median in 2019. where it was a little higher in 2018 at 1206.1. And if you remember, 2018 was a very strong kilowatt hour sales year. And so you'll see that difference play in these different ratios from time to time as well. But Illinois is kind of well down the list on this list of states, but it's right there close to what the median numbers are. And is also, you can realize that over the last 20 years, you've seen a difference where average residential usage continues to kind of slide down due to new technologies, solar, batteries, et cetera, that more and more pressure on inefficiencies, without a doubt, efficiencies of appliances and lighting, et cetera. So it's a continual challenge for the co-op accounting professionals to figure out with this flat revenue, how to budget, how to manage, how to hit your ratios and financial covenants, et cetera. So this just kind of points that out, that it is challenging, but certainly co-ops have done well in trying to meet that challenge. Next slide just kind of shows what's happened with small commercial kilowatt hours sold per total. And you can see that this is just that same number just shown separately for as we look at all these slides, slides like this, you'll see the black will represent the Illinois median numbers, and the blue line will represent the US median numbers. So back in 2010, the Illinois median was even below 17%, below the US, and kind of overtook that in 2013 and 14, ran pretty much the same for 3 or 4 years. And here recently from 18 to 19, there was an uptick. And another thing I want to just point out to you as we go through these, we did add one new cooperative came back into the KRTA program in 2018. So in some cases, our numbers might be a little bit different because we've got 24 co-ops now reporting for the last 2 years versus 23 prior to that in most categories. This is looking at the average for small commercial kilowatt hour usage per month. What's interesting here is Illinois is 9th in small commercial kilowatt hour usage per month. And it's, I don't know, I'm assuming that a little bit of a surprise to me, but very strong showing in small commercial. And the US median is at 33.28, and a little bit for 18, it was 34.20. So a little bit down, but Illinois is holding its own and doing well there in small commercial kilowatt hour usage. And again, this is taking all Illinois co-ops together. Next slide, we're going to talk about is annual growth in kilowatt hours sold as a percentage. So as we look at this one, probably the first thing that you notice is it's kind of a regular, kind of a sawtooth pattern. And again, it's what I spoke about a little bit earlier, and the volatility of the kilowatt hours sold over the last, looks like the graphic, the key over to the left must be wrong, but we started out with a 5.91% growth in 2010, dropped down below 0 in 2011, and then back and forth, up and down, where you can see that one of the strongest years we've had in many, many, many years was 2018, where we showed a 7% increase in kilowatt hours sold for Illinois co-ops. One of the things I think this has led to, as you see the sawtooth pattern, as you see competing technologies, as you see efficiencies, is trying to take the weather volatility out. And one of the ways co-ops have begun to do that is by increasing their base charge, making more of that fixed and taking less out of the variable side. And I know from my own experience, it made a big difference by increasing the base charge, taking the volatility out, and being able to manage that kilowatt hour sales, revenue, expenses in a better fashion, rather than having years where you just, because of the weather, just had so much to overcome that you never quite got your operating margins that you needed to have. Next, we're going to take a look at growth in kilowatt hour sales by state, 2018 versus 19. And here you can see Illinois is kind of about 30th on this list, but are trending right near the US median, which in 2019 was actually negative 1.32. But again, Illinois had that high number in 2019 of over 7%. Again, and looking at the heat map and kind of see how things play out. Illinois is more in the middle of the pack there as far as growth in kilowatt-hour sales by state. The next one we're going to look at is growth in consumers. And as you look at this one, the U.S. median for 2019 was 0.58, down from 0.6 in 2018. And Illinois is well down the list, 42nd on this list. So the growth is very, very small, and I think below 0.3 even makes it very challenging to increase sales when your growth in consumers is down. But on the flip side, when we see that small commercial showing an uptick, there's one area where definitely co-op can see some growth if they have the ability to get some new small commercial sales, even though in this economy in times it's pretty difficult. As we move on to the next, we're going to switch over and look at some consumer trends and some total utility plant growth. Slides next. And so annual growth number consumers, this is kind of what we just talked about. From Illinois, it goes from 0.14 to 0.27. Not a real strong number, but the U.S. is only 0.37 to 0.58 in the cooperative world. But we'll see that Illinois growth in total consumers did tick upward in 2019, so every little bit helps. As we move on, annual growth in total utility plant. So here we're trying to measure how much money the co-ops are investing in the utility plant to keep it strong, to build new lines, to rebuild old lines, to make the reliability better. And as you can see here, back in 2010, there was a strong investment in total utility plant of 4.66% for Illinois in the black line there, whereas the U.S. median was only 3.92. Very next year, Illinois went down significantly to 3.41. And I'm wondering if weather played a factor in pushing that number down so low so quick. It did rebound in 2012 above 4%, and then has been trending a little bit below the U.S. median and even ticked downward a little bit more, so that the spread between the U.S. median co-ops at 369 versus 3.13. And key thing here is total utility plant, capital credit retirements, and margins are all part of that three-legged stool that you need to balance and manage to keep your equity a place that's manageable, and to keep your system operating effectively and good, to keep those lights on for your members. So a very big area to take a look at to see how you're doing and make plans for how you should be doing to keep that reliability strong. Now we're going to move and take a look at some revenue and margin trends next. Next slide talks about electric revenue per kilowatt hour sold. And if you look at this one, again, the black is Illinois, blue is the US. Back in 2010, we were 11.37 cents of electric revenue we had per kilowatt hour sold, whereas the Illinois median was just right at 10 cents. Roll forward to 2014, the Illinois co-ops went up to 13.05 cents, whereas the US median was almost 11.1 cents. And then in 2019, we're up to 13.6 cents. So we're collecting more and more revenue in order to meet our margin requirements, et cetera, whereas the US is 11.27. So there's a difference there of about 2.3 cents. That gap has widened a little bit. So just be aware of that and be aware of things that you can do to manage your electric revenue per kilowatt hour sold to meet the objectives of co-op. Next, we just take a look at margins. This is total margins. And you can see here in 2010, they were pretty close to the US median. 2013 kind of took a strong leap forward above the US median and have stayed there and kept that gap pretty much ever since. So I'm assuming that was done and happened in a way that co-ops needed to manage their margins a little better and made them stronger in order to hit their financial covenants and ratios, et cetera. You will see in 2019 that margins declined a little faster than what they did at the US median, but still some strong numbers that are coming into play there. Next, we're going to take a look at some expenses. So for the controllers out there and the CFOs, expense trends are things that sometimes keep us up at night. So as we look at these numbers, I'm going to take a look at the ratio 105, which is total cost of service minus power cost. So what's it take to run our business? And we're going to strip the power costs out and compare that. And again, going back, the Illinois median was at 41.87 or roughly 4.2 cents in 2010. And the US median was at 3.35 cents. 2015, Illinois bumped up to 4.7 cents. And the US was at 3.7, so about 9-cent difference there. By the time we get to 2019, we're at 5 cents, a little over 5 cents in Illinois, and 4.1 cents. And probably the only concerning thing there is seeing that the spread getting a little bit wider. And actually, it's stayed pretty consistent, I guess, since 2015. So that's a good thing. But it appears that there's rising controllable costs of service and not enough maybe revenues to offset that as we look forward. Next, we're going to look at ratio 106. So what's the total cost of electric service if you leave power costs in the mix per kilowatt hour sold? And on this one, you can see that we started back in 2010 at 11.36 cents with power cost included. So the all-in cost versus the US median was at 9.8 cents. And then in 2015, we're up at 13.2 cents versus 10.9 cents. And by 2019, we're up to 13.5 cents versus 11 cents. So there's a spread of about 2.5 cents between the Illinois co-ops and the US median co-ops. So again, that's all part that we're very sensitive to, very familiar with, and doing everything we can to manage those costs and power costs as we move forward over the next few years. Now let's take a look at power cost by itself. Ratio 88 here shows power cost just per kilowatt hours purchased. So how much power costs are we buying from the G&T or from an independent source? We have 6.6 cents, 6.65 cents back in 2010 for the Illinois co-ops and 6.2 cents. So fairly narrow gap. About a half a cent, a little less than a half a cent there in 2010. Go forward to 2015, we're up to 7.8 cents. So you can see a pretty good, strong increase in power cost, whereas the US median was only 6.8 cents. Difference of just about a penny there. And then as you look forward to 2019, we came in at 8 cents versus the US median at 6.7, about a 1.3% increase. And again, just everybody's working hard on trying to keep power costs down, keep them steady, and manage those so that there's not large increases all at one time. As we roll forward, this next one shows power cost per total kilowatt hours sold, where the line loss is included in this one. So this number is going to be a little higher. We go from 7.1 cents all the way up to 8.4 cents on the Illinois side, and from 6.6 up to 7 cents for the US median. So that takes care of power cost. And so a lot of these things you can't necessarily do lots of things about, but you can kind of focus on where you want the co-op to be and how you manage your costs from year to year so that you can try to keep things as stable as possible. I know members don't like to see the ups and downs, like the gas pump prices going up and down. And I think co-ops in general have done a great job of stabilizing their power costs and keeping them fairly, as they do rise, to try to keep those to a minimum. As we roll forward to the next part, we're going to look at financial performance ratios next. And this is looking at tier versus O-tier. Tier is basically just measures the system's ability to earn margin sufficient to cover your interest expense. So the tier here is in the blue stacks, and it goes from 2.45%, or a 2.45. In 2015, it goes up to 248, and in 2019, it's up to 264. I think the RUS minimum for tier is 1.25. So as you can see here by looking at this graph and even looking at the operating tier, finishing above 2% in 2019. these operating coverage ratios look very, very solid for Illinois. Oops, sorry, didn't switch my slides. Okay, next we've got MDSC, modified debt service coverage versus debt service coverage. And this is the median for Illinois co-ops. And the blue, or the black line is actually the MDSC, and that's what I'm going to talk the most about. That's a special coverage ratio that includes the PAT cap, the cash part of PAT cap in there, as well as interest expense, interest income, operating margins, depreciation. And CFC has a requirement for their loans, just have the one debt service requirement that CFC requires, and that's having a 1.35 MDSC coverage ratio in 2 of the last 3 years, and that's the 2 best of the last 3 years average. So a 1.35 is the standard. And so the Illinois co-ops were a 1.66 in 2010. They got up to 1.82 in 2013, dropped down to 1.59, and here this past year in 2019, we're at 1.7. And so those ratios are nice and strong. And again, half the co-ops higher, half the co-ops lower. Some co-ops manage to a very thin margin of around a 1.4. Others will try to manage closer to 2. It all depends on the objectives and the plans that your co-op has in managing the financial ratios. But again, these are all very strong numbers. Illinois co-ops appear to be very healthy and very strong. As we move to the next one, this slide's a little bit messed up, so I'm just going to kind of tell you what the numbers are, because I think we used the capitalization ratio instead of the total equity. But what I'm trying to show here, and the point of this slide, is comparing the importance of comparing total equity versus distribution equity. So total equity or distribution equity has you to exclude the equity in your associated orgs and your GMTs. So that's more of a paper equity that's hard to get to, hard to manage. And so just don't look at total equity by itself without taking a look at distribution equity. The reason I say this is that total equity for this slide should show 39.9% in the blue smokestack as compared to 37.29 for distribution equity. So back in 2010, there was only a spread of 2.7%. If you roll forward to 2014, the total equity number should have been 44.05. Compare that to 36.33, and there's a spread of 7.72% there. So that gap is widening, spreading apart farther. And in 2019, we're at 48.35, which is a very strong total equity number for Illinois co-ops, but the distribution equity is 39.03, a difference of 9.32. So as that spread gets wider and something harder to manage, and just recommending that co-ops, keep an eye on distribution equity along with total equity, so they see that difference, because part of that equity is not necessarily easy to get to or easy to monetize in any way. So there's something to put in your portfolio of financial policies to take a look at the difference between those two and try to manage as best you can with distribution equity. And hopefully sorry about that slide. But next, we're going to talk about cost of capital and patronage. Cost of capital, blended interest rate. This is an interesting slide, and I did pull out some old 30-year mortgage rate averages in the United States just to talk about this. Back in the early 1980s, we saw 30-year mortgage interest rates above 17.5%. And then it kind of drifted down until 2008, and then it took another dive down, finally got below 5%. My boss used to tell me that anytime you could get a 30-year mortgage below 6%, take it, and take as much as you can. And then here in 2020, 21, we've seen those 30-year mortgage rates even dip below 3%. So historically low interest rate times. And if you're having to borrow money, need to borrow money to go out and fix it 30 years, is a great time to do it and take that interest rate completely off the table. But as you can see from looking at this slide, the U.S. median is the line. The smokes, the dark blue is the Illinois median here, or black. And it shows Illinois there at 5.42% in 2010, down to 4.62 in 2015, and all the way down to 4.35 by 2019. So there's a 107 basis point decline there. And so as you have new debt that you're borrowing, or as you're repricing debt, these are some great times to be able to borrow that 30-year money below 4%, and to manage your portfolio in a way that makes sense. But we haven't seen these kind of historical rates. And it's kind of interesting, back in March, some of the volatility concerns and the liquidity concerns that happened over a few days really put a lot of pressure on the market. I know CFC had some problems back in 2008 with liquidity and had to borrow some money at interest rates above 10%. This time we're more prepared, and that liquidity crisis didn't really touch it. They learned from that lesson and are in great financial shape. And so as you try to work on your portfolio, you get some great opportunities, especially if you got repricings that are coming up to take advantage of these low interest rates in today's market. And we've seen a long-term downtrend, which allows us to spend money on other things besides interest, which is very helpful to the cooperative balance sheet and income statement. Next, we're going to take just a quick look at long-term interest as a percent of revenue. So as a percent of revenue, back in 2010, it was 5.62% for Illinois co-ops and 4.87% for the U.S. median. And by 2019, got down to 4.94% and down even to 4.3% for U.S. median co-ops. So again, the same kind of numbers, just expressed as a percentage of revenue. Okay, now we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about capital credits retired for total equity. This is an interesting slide because, as you can see, back in 2010, Illinois co-ops were probably around 1.2% of retiring capital credits for total equity. Just 1.2% of their equity was being retired. And then in 2013, actually got to where the Illinois co-ops were retiring more than the U.S. median. It dipped back down and then came back to about the same number in 2015, stayed there till 16, and now it's spreading a little bit where Illinois co-ops are slowing down maybe a little bit compared to the U.S. median, but still a 2.65% number for U.S. and 2.36 for Illinois co-ops. And I think a lot of this happened as a result of lawsuits and co-ops being challenged in their capital credit policies legally down in the South. And I think a lot of co-ops made it a point to start working on their capital credit retirement policies so that the members knew what to expect. And in my travels around Illinois and Indiana, I've seen a lot of, and even seen some recently where they just started retired capital credits in Indiana. And the benchmarks they're using are somewhere in that 25 to 30-year mark. You can justify lower, you can justify higher, but those are the numbers I hear the most about. So just being aware of that. Something else that I don't have in a slide is looking at cumulative fat cap. So what has the co-ops done in Illinois versus US on cumulative fat cap? For the US, it's almost 28%, 27.99% is the cumulative fat cap number in 2019. Illinois co-ops are at 24.44, so only about 3.5% behind the US median. We're back 10 years ago, they were 6.5% behind. So Illinois co-ops have caught up and have done a better job of retiring capital credits on a more timely basis. And also by creating a capital credit retirement policy, it kind of made their members more aware of what to expect to the extent that they can, knowing that the board can always change that policy if they need to, if they run into financial difficulties in a given year. Next up, we're going to talk about cooperative strength. So on this next slide, annual growth in total utility plant dollars. We talked about this once before. This one sets it out separately. So it shows the strong investment in the total utility plant back in 2010, and then how it's kind of maybe settled down to just a little above 3% in 2019. Again, this is just an important thing. Operations engineering folks just need to find the right mix, the right balance of how much total utility plant dollars they need to keep the system strong, keep it reliable, keep those outages from happening, or allow you to get those customers back on much more quickly. And with top technology and AMI systems and all of the different things that are coming into play, reliability continues to be one of the things that co-ops do really well at. And as far as working in the field in horrible weather, they get those lights back on fairly quick. And it's just amazing the job they do with the miles of line that they do have to manage. So hats off to the operations folks there. Then this next one is taking a look at equity and tier again. And again, this is the equity slide that I referred to earlier when I was talking about distribution equity, showing where Illinois co-ops have gone from 39.99% all the way up to 48.35% in 2019. And just a very, very strong balance sheet. And again, the tier is strong as well. MDSC has been strong. Just remember, as you think about equity, I would always encourage you to think about distribution equity and total equity at the same time and look at the differences between the two. So more of a current topic, I guess, with the pandemic is, how much will this slide change in 2020? This shows the amount written off as a percentage of operating revenue, and the AR over 60 days as a percentage of operating revenue. So the blue stacks is what's been written off. The line is the AR over 60 days as a percent. And these numbers are just extraordinarily good and extraordinarily low. Co-ops have been done a very, very, very good job of collectibles and collecting their accounts. And I guess I would expect an uptick in 2020, but as I visited around the co-ops around the state, most of the impact has been fairly small, and they're working really hard with arrangements on disconnects. And I think that they'll manage it well. If they're even if they're at 0.1% of write-offs on 20 million in sales, that's only $20,000. Those numbers are extraordinarily good, and hopefully things will get back to normal soon, and this pandemic behind us and spring going, and we'll have a good year. Kind of winding down here, we've got additional KRTA products and services here I just want to touch on in the tool pack and custom studies. The tool pack is used extensively by many co-ops around. Your RVP, such as myself, can come in and do a tool pack and a KRTA presentation for the board. Custom studies, there's probably over 100 done each year where you're trying to figure out how you compare to a certain peer group that's not covered by KRTA. One that I use an example is, what if I want to see, all co-ops with a density of 3.5 or lower that are in the Midwest? How do I compare to those co-ops in some of these different categories to get a better feel for, how I should manage those expenses, or how to manage the revenue or the rates that are coming in as a result. A lot of different possibilities available there. Just get a hold of me and I can help you get a custom study done if that's something you want to do. Also, this tool pack that we have out there in the portal allows you to take your data, overlay it into the tool pack, and let you create your own ratios using different values, using percent changes, using actual values, showing different labels, and create a presentation for your board on the ratios that are most concerning or most helpful to you, to what you're trying to accomplish. You can also, they've added a new feature on here now where if you're using Budget Pro, you can pull in not only the 5 years of data, but you can pull in the 2020 pro forma budget, the 2021 budget, show those comparisons to make those numbers kind of look forward as well. And so for anybody that needs help or training, that we do have a KRTA training class for step 1 that you can take online. The other 2, hopefully we'll get back to some in-person training soon. Bettina Kimmel heads up that group, and there's her phone number there. But please call me and I'll help you get the information that you need, or come out to your co-op when it's appropriate and help you with a KRTA presentation or learning how to use the tool pack and all the different features a little better. With that, I think that should wrap it up, and I'm ready for questions. If there's any questions from the audience.
Thank you, Brian. There have been a few questions that have come in, so I'll read you one real quick. Let's see. Where can I obtain additional information on the KRTA tool pack or using the KRTA data for my co-op?
Okay, so the tool pack, the information is out there. It's on your CFC portal. So as long as you have the security to go out and see that, you can go pull your KRTA data as well as the executive summary. You can pull off the portal. There is a training session for version 1 that you can take online that will help you. And the RVPs, myself, Aaron Stallings, are also available to help you in any way to kind of get up to speed on KRTA.
And another question, you may have answered this, but how can I obtain specialized studies of different peer groups to help analyze our co-op's data?
Yeah, the specialized studies, preferably contact your RVP and they'll put you in touch with the KRTA group, find out what you want, give them the requirements, and then give them the time to pull that together. And the KRTA group back at CFC headquarters will work on those requests as they come in.
All right, last question. When will the data be available for the 2020 KRTA?
Typically, I mean, last year was an anomaly because of the pandemic and those reports didn't get out until September. Typically, we get those reports done in June, and it's predicated on everybody's Form 7s getting turned in on time and getting processed. So hopefully somewhere in that June timeframe, it'll return to in 2021 if everything goes as planned. Really sorry that we had to wait so long and to get 2019's data, but just a result of what was going on in the world that kept the Form 7s from being filed timely.
Very good. Hey, Brian, we want to thank you so much for joining us today and presenting on KRTAs. It's definitely some good information. I'm sure everyone benefited from that. For our attendees today, if you would like to refer back to this presentation, this will be available at aiec.coop/webinar weeks, along with all of our previous webinars. We do have about a week lag time getting these posted. So today's webinar, our past webinars, any future webinars, if you'd like to go back and review those, or if you didn't have an opportunity to attend one, they are available. So with that, that concludes our second webinar today. We do have our third webinar coming up. That'll be at 1 o'clock. And what is that on, Brian?
It's on outage management.
Outage management, and that is available for PE credits. So if you'd like to attend that and you haven't registered yet, please go out to aiec.coop/webinar weeks, register for that webinar. We will leave registration open for what, about an hour before.
Yeah.
But if it's after that, feel free to reach out to Ashley Graham and she'll make sure that you get registered. So with that, Brian, again, thank you very much. We appreciate your time today.
Thank you.